Today I am going to be talking about chapter 15 of How to Do Life by Traleg Rinpoche. And this chapter is titled Support Structure for Emotion. So it is a mistake to think that meditation and mindfulness by themselves will lead automatically to pacification of the emotions. We have to know more about this than just expecting a little shamatha meditation to take care of it. The Buddhist masters of the path have a lot to say about emotions. They looked into these in great detail. And they talk about the benefits and the harm, which one leads to disturbances, which one leads to contentment, and how they arise. So here is a quote from the beginning of this chapter. There are connections between our experience of suffering, negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative attitudes, and beliefs, and the experience of happiness and positive emotions and positive feelings and mental attitudes. There is a lot that we need to look into in this chapter about how to be happy and how to avoid all kinds of negative consequences in our lives. Basically, we practice to be happy. And the experience of happiness leads to some type of satisfaction at one level or another. And that satisfaction then leads to well being. So there is a key link here between our experience of pain and suffering and the experience of negative emotions. In other words, when we have suffering, when we have mental suffering, it tends to bring on negative emotions. And even if, because we've meditated somewhat, we recognize that we have very disturbed thoughts, that we are emotionally disturbed, we still might encourage more negativity to arise and even more confusion. And this is because we don't realize how the support structure works and how a negative support structure just tends to encourage and perpetuate negative emotions. And it's more of the same old, and you keep wondering why you end up in the same place or in a slightly different place, maybe the house next door, but you haven't left the neighborhood. So Buddhist practice is about dealing with our experience of negative emotions that arise in our daily lives and how to cultivate positive emotions. And then, as I've already hinted at here, it's also about working with removing the support structure for negative emotions so that we can weaken them and have them arise less frequently. So we need to look at the things that make up the trigger that sets off negative emotions. I find it interesting that he used the word trigger because in at least the United States, the past few years, they talk about things triggering trauma from the past and so forth. And so he's talking about there are things that will trigger any of the negative emotions. And we need to look at these causal factors or triggers, if you would like, and work skillfully with them, or else there will be little progress in reducing the power of the kleshas, afflictive states of mind. However, if we can develop a healthy support structure, healthy emotions arise, and these negative emotions, if they do arise, they don't dwell, they quickly leave. Buddhist practices that are very helpful are shamatha meditation, loving kindness meditation and practice, mind training, visualization of the various tantric deities, and analytical meditation or vipassana. All of these have a specific purpose, and they weaken the support structure for negative emotions, or they strengthen the support structure for positive emotions. It's important to remember this, that they work differently. It's not that each one works the same way, that they work from slightly different perspectives on slightly different problems. So if we can do these practices distraction will arise less, and we will have a much healthier psychological experiences and structure. And this will automatically then make us feel better and develop a sense of satisfaction in life. Ordinarily, there is this, what Chogyam Trungpa called a poverty mentality. And it is feeling that we are lacking something, that there is something missing in our lives. And no matter how much we have of a good thing, it never is enough. We always are left with the feeling of, I would rather have had more of that, unless, of course, it's an unpleasant situation. So our pleasant present situation is characterized by dissatisfaction. He used the Sanskrit word dukkha, which is translated sometimes as suffering, but it really means just dissatisfaction. Tralek Rinpoche says it can just plain mean pure and simple suffering, a feeling of non fulfillment, of discontent, dissatisfaction. We go through life with this poverty mentality, this sense of not having enough and being dissatisfied. And if we do get a little taste of satisfaction, it won't last long, or we realize it's not enough. And if you get what you want, it just means that you will now want more. If you want to save up $100,000, if you are successful, soon you will want to save up $1 million or earn $1 million. And then if you get to the million, then it's 10 million. And pretty soon you find that you're like Elon Musk and you have 300 billion and it's not enough. So mind is limitless and the desire of mind is limitless. What we need to do then is develop a positive support system so that our mind can feel satisfied, can feel contentment, that we can reduce, weaken, and eventually eliminate the negative states of mind and emotions. He makes a point of saying that it's important to become less hostile, less distracted, less resentful. And the opposite is to become more trusting, more open minded, more flexible. If you can develop these positive qualities, that you will feel better. You will become more positive and your emotions will become more positive. And he talks about the idea of samskaras, which are mental imprints, they're patterns, so that we are constantly leaving these mental imprints or patterns on our mind. If we're leaving negative imprints, then that will just reinforce having more negative mental imprints and more negative behavior. In the West, a lot of times this is called mental conditioning, that we train our mind to see things in a certain way, react in a certain way, value certain things, and devalue other things, and so forth. So it's really important to leave mental imprints that are going to be beneficial to us. Meditation practice is used to work with negative emotions as they arise. When we meditate, if a negative emotion arises, we can let go of it rather than hanging on to it and letting it gain strength in us to gain more negative feelings. So shamatha trains us to be mindful at first, and then from there to develop awareness. As we improve in being aware and mindful, this leaves the mind a very poor place for negativity to hang out, so to speak. And he defines mindfulness as this: training ourselves to be in the present and not chasing after past experiences or anticipating future experiences. So mindfulness is not about being present, but it means being able to stick to one thing without chasing after this or that. And that one thing frequently is the breath. meditation, shamatha meditation, is sometimes called mind taming because instead of the mind going off in all different directions as thoughts arise, we develop the strength, the ability to keep our mind focused on the one thing, and it becomes tame, just like you would tame a dog. The next is non forgetfulness, and I define that as being vigilant. What that means is inner distraction, subtle distraction, support negative frames of mind. And as we practice mindfulness, the antidote to getting distracted is being vigilant, to become alert to when your mind starts wandering and immediately bring it back. So if we forget that we are distracted, or if we're bored and looking for entertainment, then we ordinarily let go of following the breath and just follow the thoughts. That any kinds of feelings or sensations, just about anything, can easily distract us if we do not have this non forgetfulness of the mindfulness technique. Then there is awareness, and this develops over a period of time as we practice. And he says, quote, when we have developed awareness, there is a presence of mind naturally. We do not get so distracted and carried away when thoughts arise. We can let go of them and bring our mind back to the technique. In other words, the awareness is that you're aware that you are having other thoughts, but you also, because of your vigilance, non-forgetfulness, remember that you are meditating and you quickly come back to meditating. And finally, he talks about non-fixation, which means not fixating on whatever it is that arises in your mind or whatever it is that you experience through one of your five senses, like sight, hearing, touch, smell, or taste. You're able to see what's going on, but again, avoid getting distracted. It's a touch and go situation. It's awareness that is grounded in mindfulness, and we avoid speculating about the future or going over the past, what's happened in the past. I like the analogy of non-fixation on thoughts being a bit like a snake uncoiling. I read this in a book written by a Tibetan master. I cannot remember the name of the book or the master, who it was. But when a thought arises when we're meditating, to let go of it like a snake uncoiling. And if you ever watched a snake uncoiling, it's hard to even see that the snake is moving, but there is movement. The snake uncoils slowly. The snake is no longer coiled up. And what this means is when we have a thought, we bring our mind back to the breath, but we do it in such a way that is gentle and unobtrusive. And you don't get distracted in letting go of the distraction and bringing your mind back to the breath, that you do it in a natural way that is very minor and keeps you from, again, getting distracted by bringing yourself back from the distraction. Again, when negativity arises, we don't get shocked by it. We don't grab onto it. We might look at it. It's sometimes good, even Karmapa has talked about this, to look at it like it's happening to somebody else, like it's arising in somebody else's mind rather than your mind. So having a feeling of detachment isn't quite the right word. Separation between you and the thought, that you are not your thoughts, and that you can have this feeling of, oh, maybe another word would be like watching a movie, an emotion in a movie, but you still realize it's a movie. Self-judgments and criticisms of all kinds are all just more distraction. And we need to leave those alone too in our meditation practice. And finally, this vigilance means that we have to let go quickly, or else we're going to be developing negative patterns. And it'll be harder next time to let go of these distractions and negativities when they arise. He says that our negative emotions are built on a support structure of a distracted mind. I like that. If our minds are distracted, it's very difficult when negativity arises in our mind to come back to the breath and let go of it. Quote, it is difficult to concentrate when inattentive, clinging to our thoughts, concepts, and experiences, not being able to let go of things, all of this fostering a general lack of self awareness. With this lack of self awareness, there is this inability to concentrate, clinging to the thoughts, concepts, experiences that are going through our mind. And this causes all kinds of problems. And if we develop irritation and hostility to these thoughts or to ourselves for having these thoughts, this just keeps us trapped. We're not going anywhere. It's the same old, same old. So it's important to recognize this pattern, but to let go of it, to learn new ways of working with your monkey mind that just going over and saying to yourself or thinking that you're a bad person and you can't do it and who knows what all else, but all of this just reinforces that kind of behavior. It doesn't change the behavior. So I have this emphasized that the basic point is being able to recognize and then let go. Recognize that you're having thoughts, perhaps negative thoughts, and then let go of them, even the strong ones. That is the way we introduce change. Really, this is more important than trying to have a peaceful mind when you meditate, which is really a wrong understanding of why we meditate. We meditate not necessarily to have a peaceful mind, but to overcome the negative support structures in our mind. He then talks about Lojong. He calls it loving kindness meditation. And we use our shamatha meditation as a foundation to build on with these other forms of meditation. After we have practiced shamatha enough to have attained a somewhat stable mind, we're now ready to train the mind with the 7 points of mind training. We're ready to develop new positive habits that will benefit ourselves and benefit others. So to develop new and positive habits, we need to get to know our emotions better, our motivation, and basically the way our mind works. We all have had negativity arise in our minds in the past. We've had negativity mixed with positive emotions in the past. Now we have an opportunity to observe ourselves more closely. And it's very, very good to do this, to get to know yourself at a very deep level. This allows us to have more pure emotions in the future, to develop new patterns that are more healthy. So if we develop more compassion, love, and joy, we will then have much greater positive emotions. If we can generate more compassion, joy, and love, this too will lead to positive emotions and it will lead to benefiting other beings as well. These are things that we can do to encourage positive emotions, to work on through the 7 points of mind training, insight meditation, and other types of practices, develop more insight into the causes of suffering and renounce them and work with our minds in a very positive method. On page 192, he says, quote, when we begin the analysis of experience, we are considering and contemplating the difference between what we experience and reality, end quote. So this is a very important point. He's actually talking about how to do analytical meditation or vipassana. What he is talking about here is get to know yourself, get to know your thoughts, about the external world and understand the expectations that you place on the external world, whether it be people or objects or animals or cars or whatever. He talks about Vipassana this way. It's you sit down on the cushion, you remain quiet. You could do it in a chair if you wanted to, but then you go to thinking about a particular happening that whoever it is that you have visualized in front of you was involved in, and contemplate the sorts of things that you brought to the situation, the expectations, what you were trying to prove about yourself. And then, after getting a better understanding, let go of it. Let go of it. Again, touch and go, get to know yourself much better, get to know how you are controlled by these negative emotions, and let go. The more we see these distortions and expectations that we have about other people, the more we are able to free ourselves from this. The point is to come to an understanding where you are observing without this idea of you being a separate, unique, independent self, without emotional overlays and fabrications and all the rest of it, exaggerations that we do, conjecture, extrapolation. This reminds me of when, yada, 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 and so forth. In other words, all the distortions that we place on our experience that other people do not place on their experience. So Vipassana is sitting down quietly on a cushion or on a chair, doing some shamatha meditation, and then moving on to thinking and contemplating about how you process information from outside and what you impose on that information. That is very important. And as a result, we can develop some clarification and precision how we experience things and start seeing more clearly what's actually going on rather than what we think is going on. So the main thing here is to contemplate on our experience in relation to reality or how things are. If we do this, we will realize that things are constantly changing. I am reminded when he talked about that of the Greek philosopher who said you cannot step into the same river twice. The reason why he said that, in fact, his specialty was impermanence. And the reason why he said that is because the river is flowing, it is always a different river. Plus, the person that steps in it has been changed because now they have stepped into the river. And the next time they step into it will not be the first time. It will just be the next time they stepped into the river. So the river is constantly changing, and the person, the experiencer, is constantly changing. Prahlad Rinpoche talks about you have two choices of what to do with that knowledge. One is, quote, yes, I know that everything changes. That's life. So what? The other is to look at this as a much more meaningful realization and realize the profundity of this. When you let go of things, and it may seem like the same thing arises in your mind, it's different when we have a particular thought and we let go of it and then it arises again. It's a different thought. It's a new thought. We can realize that we don't have to grasp at our experiences, our thoughts, that we can just let them come and we can let them go. When we're able to do that, we begin to change. And the same old changes too. Our experience is different every time, no matter how similar it is to something that has happened in the past. And this conforms to reality, that we are not solid, we are not unchanging entities, that our experience and the objects of our experience are not solid, that they are changing too. He talks about then delusory mental states, that they are delusory because they do not correspond to what is truly happening. In a delusory state, We look at ourselves as a subject, and then if we are interacting with an object, we are seeing an object that is not us. And then there is some kind of an experience going on between I and the object. These are sometimes called the three wheels. And a highly realized being does not see it that way. They see the object is not solid, that it's constantly changing, that it's made out of interdependence, and that the person that's experiencing is not solid and unchanging. There is interdependence, causes and conditions, and then the actual experience of what's going on between the subject and the object is a result of interdependence and causes and conditions. So if you can look at it that way through analytical meditation, this helps to break down this delusionary relationship of subject and object, and both of them is seen as being permanent and unchanging. We come to realize how we construct and fabricate our experiences. Quote, this is seen as an extremely important step towards overcoming dissatisfaction and frustration, because frustration and dissatisfaction are caused from living in a fabricated world that we have created for ourselves. And that certainly is worth contemplating. Our subjective experiences are based on our own feelings, our own emotions, and they have a strong effect on us in a negative way. On the other hand, since we are not solid, we're not fixed, we're constantly changing, we can change, and it's no problem to change. So we can have real happiness instead of suffering when we cultivate virtue, supported by wholesome or positive emotions, and are living in a healthy and wholesome lifestyle that, in his words, is not based on moralistic judgmentalism. Instead of judging, we're more experiencing and taking an attitude. This is what my old German neighbor said. And he's German, but a few generations go back before you actually went back to Germany. But a friend of mine who did military service in Germany said he's more German than the Germans in Germany. His name was Werner Miller. And he would say, I keep my eyes open and my mouth shut. And if we keep our eyes open and maybe our judgmental mind shut, we'll see a lot more and we'll be living a lot more healthy lifestyle. So we want in our environment, we want the factors that encourage virtue, encourage us to be present, encourage us to be kinder, more patient. He used resilient, which I think is a very good term, meaning that when adversity arises, that we quickly recover from the adversity. On the other hand, if these are missing, then negativity increases and our faults increase. So there are many factors that he talks about in this chapter that have to be in place for happiness, satisfaction, contentment, and positive emotions to arise. Each of these different practices in Tibetan Buddhism works in different ways that all affect this level of happiness, satisfaction, and so forth. We need to do all of them because they work together. If you just do shamatha meditation, you won't have as much of a beneficial effect as if you would do some Vipassana meditation, some 7 points of mind training, and deity meditation. So it's our choice of which direction we want to go in and which practices to do. But it's very possible for us to transform our lives by practicing, understanding the purpose of the practices, and applying ourselves. Underlying all of this, he feels it's important to have a feeling of joy. The joy supports positive emotions and feelings. They protect our mind from being overcome by negativity. It helps us be more resilient. And a joyful mind then needs to be supported by positive mental factors such as equanimity, mindfulness, and patience. So he ends up by saying if we're looking for perfection in samsara or in ourselves, this is a huge problem. Samsara never will be perfect, and we will make mistakes. But we can try to make things better. We can try to be better people. We can relate to others in a way that will uplift others. And we don't have to be down on ourselves for when we do make a mistake or when we do slip. We can be more encouraging and do what we can so that we can make better choices in the future. That pretty much covers the chapter.